as I grew up in the area, but then I moved away. I came back in 2002, and it always been a desire in my heart to do something with the school because it was just sitting there. And I just knew that seemed like it was a vision that I should do something with it, but I didn't know exactly what because the school was owned by the church, and I am a member of the church. So I born and raised in St. John Baptist Church, and so the conversation kind of came up, and so one of the church meetings that they were looking to try to decide what should be done with the school. And so a group of them formed the committee, and I volunteered to be on that committee. And from that meeting, we decided that we should have a reunion, try to pull together all the alumni that were still alive, invite them to a reunion, talk to them, and just try to decide what their thoughts would be as far as what we should do with the school, how we should try to preserve it, and what we should do with it. And that is how it kind of came about. In 2009, we had the reunion. There were about 40, 45 people, I guess. Not people, but alumni. I mean, there was a large group of alumni and descendants and just friends and family that attended this reunion. And it was very, very successful. We had a 2 day occasion where the first day was like a picnic and reunion where we had guest speakers to come, and some of the alumni got up and they shared their stories. And during that same time, and I don't know if this connect to your project or not, but Dr. Lynn Rainville, and Cyril Bond was on a project also recording oral history in the area of St. John's School. And so they were there, and we arranged for them to do recordings, have sessions with the alumni. And those are the ones that you hear on, some of the ones that you will hear on the website. And that was very valuable, uh, as you can see, in for the future years. Didn't really know how valuable that was at the time, and but it was very successful. The second day we all met and at the church, went to church together. So it was very successful, and from that, um, they continued to just trying to decide what would be the best use for the school, adaptive use for the school. And so Pastor came to me, Pastor Hawkins at the time, he was the pastor, and he had asked me if I would spearhead this project. And so it was it kind of funny because he said when he came to me, it was like I already knew that I was supposed to be working on it, like I hit the lottery. And it was because I was just waiting for the leadership of the church, to come and
Mhm.
ask me to
Mhm.
work on this project. So that's how I kind of got it started. Didn't really know what to do, just started looking around and trying to decide what best we could do with the school. So from that, we formed, after talking uh, to foundation, because we know we wanted to be a nonprofit. And so I looked up a Google the question, how to become a nonprofit, and got advice on that. And I found a very helpful organization called Foundation Group, who help us to set up our foundation, help us to set up our nonprofit, to get our 501c status, and to form our board of directors, and take care of all the paperwork that was necessary to get established as a nonprofit in Virginia. So that's how we started. We didn't have any money. We didn't know how we are gonna. All we knew was that, once we formed the board, that we wanted to transform the school into something that the community could use, as well as have not only the community to utilize, but everyone, in the community, anyone coming in this area. How can we get the word out? How can we be successful at communicating what we wanted to do with the school and the goal of the school and the history of it? Because by this time we had became more aware of the historical value of the school, that it was a Rosenwald school. And so we started to learn the story, how Booker T. Washington and Julius Rosenwald worked together to create these schools. It actually was the idea of Booker T. Washington because he was, at one time, was a slave. He lived in Alabama. He knew the conditions of uh, the education system for Blacks at that time. So he was very sincere about helping uh, the Afro Americans to better their lives, their education, getting a better education. So even though he was, which was an unusual thing back in those days, that you would have a Black man as president of a college, even the Black colleges, uh, 9 times out of 10, that was not a Black president of those schools. So he worked with Julius Rosenwald, who was on the board at Tuskegee to create these schools, the first 6 ones in Alabama. And so it was very successful. So it kind of like duplicated. And that's what we learned. And that's what we started telling the story of how these schools were formed and how it came about. And so after that, we took every opportunity we could to tell the story, to get the word out. I mean, whether someone invited us to a conference, a Rosenwald conference, we went to a lot of those. We went to the National Trust conferences. We always made sure we were, when we were invited to attend those, um, the community things like Miss Maxine Holland, who's working, I believe, with the Jefferson Heritage Center. She has 2 functions that she do, events that she do each year. That was the Juneteenth festival and also the Veterans Day. So she always would invite us, and we would set up displays there. And that's how we kind of got the word out. And whenever we were doing something, we also notified it either be the Daily Progress, the news station. And we're blessed to have one of our church members to be an employee of Channel 29. So he always gave us a point of contact to connect us to someone that would come out and cover our stories. And so that's how we kind of got started. And things just, people just started, as the word got out, people just started coming forth and asking, how they could help, wanting to
Wow.
help. And that's how we met Nia Bates. I didn't know Nia herself because she's younger, but I knew her father. I know her family, the Bates family, which is her family is all members of our sister church, Zion Hill Baptist Church, about 5 miles from us. And and so she approached me one day when we had a display set up at the Juneteenth festival, uh, and she asked me, were we interested in me coming on, being nominated for the National Registry. And I said, oh, that's one of the things that we have on the to-do list. So she said that I can help you with that. So
Wow.
that's how that got started. We got on the National Register. We also learned about the highway markers. So we worked, the committee worked on the highway markers to be, and were successful at getting one of those. So that's how we kind of got started. And then we have other people who just come, and hear about our story and want to contribute their knowledge and their skills. And
Hmm.
that's been a blessing. We have a grant writer who's in North Carolina, but
Wow.
she learned through a conference that the pastor had gone to. and about us, because she was doing a workshop there, how to write grants. And Pastor invited her to come and have a workshop at our one of our meetings. And she was so enthused with the story that she said, "I will write your grants for free." So
Wow.
she's been one that has successfully gotten the two large federal grants that we have. So, and then building goodness, I could go on and on. I mean, it's just so many people that have come forth with that knowledge and that skills and have volunteered to help us. And that's how we've been successful with no
Wow.
money. I mean, we've been raising money long and long, and people have been contributing, but we don't have a bill. We're not in debt. So
Mm.
our goal has always been to do this project and be debt free.
Be
I
that.
don't want to leave. One thing I'm thinking, as you mentioned, other organizations, there have been so many organizations. I don't want to leave out, and I hope I'm not Preservation Virginia and
Mm.
Preservation Piedmont and Virginia Humanity, Justin Reed, and all, and there's others too. So I just don't want to omit anyone because they all have played a part in
Exactly.
us being successful.
Yeah.
And all Jody and all the building goodness volunteers has been extraordinary helpful. I mean,
Mm.
we wouldn't be this far in the process if they not had come on board and help us to, get the details,
Mm.
the design and the design for the plumbing, design for the electric, the
Mhm.
building itself, the blueprint for all of that. So, and then just the contractor A and then Alexander and Nicholas, which was a well-known contractor, very
Mhm.
successful contractor, on board as a project manager, and all the other organizations, companies that
Mhm.
are lending their professional knowledge to us free of charge. So,
Mm.
it's just amazing, really,
Wow. Wow.
to see this
Wow.
process work and how it's working.
Wow.
I believe that by the time I got, I attended the school the last 2 years before it closed.
Mhm.
And so 1954, things had begun to change, the environment changed, opportunities change. And so there were other things that uh, that the, the community, even though the school was involved uh, in a lot of things prior to the latter years before it closed. I think that by the time I came along, other interests like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and other clubs and other things were kind of, you know, drawing away from where the school would normally have been doing, what the school would have normally done. So, but when my mother attended school, yes, it was the focus point. And as you speak to some of the older alumni now that's still alive, it was the focus point for them because of transportation, just the availability of not being having access to transportation to go different places. And so the community, it was like a village
Mm.
where everybody knew everybody. And when they got together, it was this was a center that they could gather for school functions and also for other activities, picnics and stuff like that went on in the community, like May Day. Like I don't recall um, the May Day event being as large as some of the older um, alumni will tell you about, but it took place. It just wasn't on a larger scale as it was back in the older days because it was someplace they could travel, not to have to travel too far to get to. I mean, what we talk about 9, 10 miles wasn't what they considered too far, back
Right.
in these days. They could at
Right.
least walk to those occasions. And which a lot of the older alumni would tell you they did walk to school and
Mhm.
they didn't think too much of it. Well, it was hard, especially during the winter months when it was really, really cold. But it was something they knew they had to do, wanted to do, and they did it. And so, yes, the school did play a bigger part in prior years uh, for the community. But it the part that it played, it lasts, in their memories. It carried them through. It was like this was where education started for so many of them, and it was the future. It was a goal that that's where goals and stuff was set, that they wanted to do better. They wanted an education. They looked forward to receiving education and looking forward to sustaining themselves with that education that they were going to get, and to better their lives, because our parents encouraged us that we're going to do better, than they did. You're going to have a better education. You're going to have better jobs than we do. You're going to travel more than we do. They set goals for us, and they talked about those goals with us. And it wasn't just my family that did that. There were all of the families. When we got together, when we would have functions and stuff, that was things. My daughter, my son, they're going to college, they're going to the military. That they were excited that their children were going to be successful in life. And that was how we communicated. And then it would just carry over into the church. Everybody mostly belonged to some church. It didn't have necessarily be at St. John, but there were so many little churches in our community that not too far, especially when things got a little better, that people were able to have cars. We visit each other churches. And our teacher, Mrs. Qualls, the one I remember that was our teacher, she was very, very, very dedicated teacher. And she would, there's something called a revival every year. Or each church, each Black church anyway, have a revival. And that's when all the older alumni or members would come back home. If they were away from home, they would come back home. And even the people that didn't go to church that often, on revival Sunday, they would make sure they were there. And this revival would last all week. It started on Sunday and last until Friday. And it would start with a, a Sunday service that lasted all day. You'll have a morning service, and then you would break from morning service, and people would bring their dinners, and they would serve dinners. And that's where you would learn some of the people's best recipes. Everyone had their specialties. So it was just an enjoyable time when we broke to have lunch, and dinner was served. And then after that, there would be a guest speaker in the evening. And so everyone was trying to have the best guest speaker that they could have to draw people in to that evening service so they could enjoy the word that was coming forth. So that was like another big occasion, that a community affair, that people would join in from all over the different communities and just gather at the church. So the church played a part, and most of the time, everyone that went to St. John school, a lot of us were members of the St. John Church. If we weren't a member of the St. John Church, then we were a member of the Zion Hill Church. And then there was another church down the road too far called Pleasant Plain. These are all Black churches. And so we all, and then another one, Wilden Grove. These are the churches that we kind of, in our community, in the Carpan, I would say, community, kind of, we were like sister churches. And so we formed this little village. Everybody knew each other. A lot of times as children grew up, they marry into each other's families. And so it just grew into a big family. And the amazing part of this for St. John Elementary School is that a lot of them are still right there in the community. If they're not still alive, then their children are alive and their grandchildren are alive. And so you have descendants right there on St. John Road. And those are some of the people that will come out and volunteer to do work and support us. And we have them on the board as well, and community members on the board. And so we have a great support system right there on St. John Road. and not even talking about the other communities that are around us. And now other people are coming in, people that like Grace Church, which was um, in the past considered to be a white church. We would call them white churches and black churches because the majority of white people, all white people went to one church, all black people went to one church in our community. It was just how society was back in those days. And we were comfortable, I think, in our form of service, our way we did things. And not that it was anything wrong with the way they did it, but we were more comfortable in our churches, and they were more comfortable in our church. But things are changing now. So Grace Church has been very helpful and reaching out to us, supporting us, and just inviting us to things that they are involved in. And we are now scheduled to be a stop on that Grace Church Farm tour that they have been having for years. And so this year, well, last year they did too, but because of COVID, they didn't have. But this year, they in 2022, we are invited again to be one of the stops on that tour. So we're thankful to Grace Church
Wow.
for inviting us to be a part of that.
Mhm.
So yes, I believe they will. They have in the past, and I think they will. And with us developing this community center, there's even more reason now
Mhm.
they will come. They are all excited about. Um, in the COVID slowed us down a little bit as far as traveling and communicating with one another. But I think it would pick back up again because right now our church is not fully open, and so we have not been as active as we would have normally been at having festivals and reunions and stuff like that. But I think it will begin once COVID start behaving itself and we are back communicating again with one another. So yes, I think the future is even greater now than the past. That we are going to because you have the younger people now getting involved,
Mhm.
and they want to. They are learning about their ancestors, and they're getting their education like now Bates and Lorenza and all have gone off and got college education and have been back in the community and working and doing that part, contributing to the legacy of their ancestors.
Mhm.
Uh, once they're back, they're using that skills and that knowledge to contribute to making people aware and
Wow.
sharing their knowledge with us.
Mhm.
So I think it will continue. Like Pastor Hawkins' daughter Tia, she is very interested in this field. So I think once she's finished college and whatever she decides to do, I think she always will be a part of this. And so we're going to need the younger people to step up and kind of, take over the reign and
Right.
to make this successful, continue this legacy. So
Mhm.
we're proud of them and we look forward to them coming back and being a part and
Mhm.
want to lead, take up the torch and lead this effort.
Mhm.
We don't
That's
have a problem with that.
that.
And right beside the school, that house that is right beside the school,
Wow.
once an art fellow hall. That was a place that people gathered for dances, socials, as they used to call them. And so it was a group of black men, older black men that uh, owned that building. It was called Our Fellows Hall. And I did not realize that Our Fellows is a national organization.
Okay.
We always thought it was just a little group of black men, having a club right there, but they are part of a larger group. I mean, they were segregated back in those days, they were not integrated people groups, but there's a big history behind Our Fellows Hall. So that's one of the things you might want to research, or someone might want to research the history of the Our Fellow Hall that was right beside the school and is now a private home, but I remember the first lady that, she might not have been the first, it was the second lady that, what was her name? I can't think of her name. Um, that lived there for a while. She's not there now. But she was the first one to tell me that, the story of the Oddfellow Hall, that it wasn't just that group of men that that was a little private club there. It really was a part of a larger organization.
Mhm.
So I think that's one of the ones that the story has not been told. The men that belonged to my father, my grandfather was an odd fellow, and they would call themselves odd fellows.
Our
And
fellows.
so they would be pretty proud that they were odd fellows. Nobody knew what they were about because the building is two-story. And so downstairs is where they would have socials and rent it out for people. People could rent it out and have socials and things. But upstairs, no one was allowed to go upstairs. That's where they had their meetings. And so it was very secret what took place upstairs with the art fellas. So it probably would be an interesting story. The lady that lives in it now was, when we did our demolition day, we got to meet her. She came over. A lot of the neighbors know her already, but since I moved, when I moved back in 2002, I stayed there for 17 years. And then, but 3 years ago, I moved back to Maryland after we sold our parents' home, because my parents' home was right on St. John Road. And so they will, they have renovated it. So if you would like to go in and ask her to give you a tour, I'm pretty sure she would allow you. Just identify as to who you are. Yeah, she would be very happy to give you a tour of the. I know the other lady, the other family was very, very,
Okay.
very friendly. And
Okay.
so that's the story I can think of that probably would be interesting to find out more about. There was a train station there, and I don't remember too much about it, but I know there was a general store right on 22 at the end of St. John Road, where St. John Road ends. Uh, that big house there, the sits on 22, that it has been renovated, but it was a little small store there. And that was a general store that was ran by a family that I remember, the Smith. And I understand that their daughter still owned property in that area. All those houses, some of those houses that's right in that area, that their daughter Diane still owned some of those properties. And so probably some of the families that still live there in that area, up on the hill. I'm not sure about the people that live in the renovated house. I think they're all new families. But somebody would have to know something about that train station,
Okay.
because some of the families are still there. If you can look up some prophets, their name were prophets. I know they were, and I think a lot of them are still in the area. They are white family, last name Prophet. They might would know something about that train station a little more than we knew. And for some reason, some of the alumni seem to have mentioned someone that worked at that train station. But I'm not aware of it. I don't have. I can't give you any official information on that. I just remember a train station being there. I remember that you could stop there. I mean, you could get off the train there, and you could catch the train
Okay.
there. So it was a stop, and it may some kind of way it was connected to Lindsay, a place called Lindsay, Virginia. I'm not sure how, but I think it was just take a little more digging, and
Okay.
maybe just talking to the people in the neighborhood that lives there now, that still would have been descendants of some of the people that once lived there. So
Okay.
we actually had two general stores on each end of the road. One that would have been the Cobham, we call Cobham General Store. And then on the other end, on 231, where St. John Road began, there was a store there. It's now a business. But all my life, I remember this little store being there, and we would frequent that store all the time. It was black owned. It had always been black owned. That one was always black owned, and it was called Cash's Corner.
Mm.
So I think some of the story behind Cash's Corner had been lost because there were quite a few owners, but the owners were always black, and they ran that store until I guess 10, maybe 20 years ago, when it was sold and became a business instead of a general store. So it was, as I say, we were in a little village. We had our community center and our church and our school and our general store.